What is up, booktube? It is Monty, and today I am back again once again with another video. Today I am coming to you with my July wrap-up. I read 13 books in the month, but I can only talk about a handful of them right now, so I'm going to get the books that I can't really get into too much out of the way at the beginning, so you know that I read them. I have thoughts, I have opinions, but my thoughts and opinions on those books are going to continue to simmer within me until a later date. So the first of those that I can't really talk about right now is Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. This is the second book in the Dandelion Dynasty. It is the longest book that I have read so far this year. I gave it 1 star. Again, we'll get into it at some point in the future, but just know for right now, read it, it was a 1 star, didn't like it. The next book I can't really talk to you guys about is Akwaeke Emezi's most recent release, and that is You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. Again, 1 star. Again, it's not the moment. Again, I can't wait to have a full in-depth discussion with you about it. And then the last of the books that I can't really talk about at this juncture is Kaike by Vaishnavi Patel. Again, 1 star. Again, not the moment. Again, a hyped book that didn't really fuck with it. So I will have all of my thoughts and opinions on those 3 books, hopefully in a video coming out at the end of the month. That's my goal. That's the aim. So hopefully, again, you'll get my thoughts and opinions. You just know I read those books in July. Was not a fan of them. The next book that I won't really get too much into, like, these are books that I could get into, but I read them for my Patreon exclusive reading vlog, and so we're just going to leave most of my thoughts over there. But I read The Night Shift by Alex Finley. This is a thriller mystery type situation where we're following the events of a murder that happens at a nondescript ice cream parlor and how it may or may not be tied to a similar killing that happened at a Blockbuster like 20 years before the events of the story. It was fine. It was very average. There were a lot of red herrings that really didn't go anywhere. It was very generic. You know, like if it was an episode of Law and Order, probably would have sold. You know, like it would have been a really solid episode of Law and Order, Criminal Minds. It's very that. If it was that, it probably would have been a good thing, but it wasn't. It was a book, and so it didn't work. Like there were characters who were doing things that didn't make any sense. It's set in like a relatively small town, and yet a character who was the person who they thought was responsible for the murder at the Blockbuster had a family member who was able to like leave the town and come back, and nobody recognized. It was weird. So overall, it was a pretty big disappointment. I also read the Celestial Kingdom duology for my Patreon. So I read Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior by Sulin Tan. I gave both of these 3 stars pretty much. I mean, I didn't rate the first one on Goodreads. It was like closer to like a 2.5. And then the second one I gave 3 stars. I think that both of these could have had like really compelling family narratives that were just kind of pushed aside for a rather lackluster romance arc. I had heard going into it that Daughter of the Moon Goddess was like more fantasy romance than fantasy overall. And I don't think it really worked. We're following Chong-Yi's daughter, whose name is eluding me, so we're pulling up the Goodreads page. Shinyan. We're following her as she like tries to free her mother from her imprisonment on the moon, and she falls in love with, there's like a love triangle situation that happens, and it just wasn't very good. And then the second book, Heart of the Sun Warrior, was a little bit better. There we are dealing with like a government coup type situation, and like Shinyan has to respond to the coup, and there's like a culmination of the love triangle that plays out, and both of them were just fine. I do like Sulin Tan's writing. It was just like the plot that didn't really do anything for me. And so I am interested to read the standalone that's going to take place in the same world, and to see what book she comes out with outside of this world that she's created, because Harper Voyager did get 2 books from her in another deal. Heart of the Sun Warrior will come out later this year. I think it's like a November release. And Daughter of the Moon Goddess is out now. I think Harper just tweeted out that the paperback is coming in September if you're in the United States. So if you want to pick it up at a cheaper price point, you can do that. But yeah, they were fine. They were average. I will continue to read from Sulin Tan, but I don't know. It just it was pretty mediocre if I'm being it was just okay. Heart of the Sun Warrior was like a bigger letdown, I think, just because it had the opportunity to like really dive into the rich family plot, and we again was just the stupid romance. Although Heart of the Sun Warrior did sell me on who Shinyan ultimately decided to end up with and the romance overall. So like Heart of the Sun Warrior wasn't a total flop, and so like it had some redeeming qualities, but it was a struggle to get there. the Now we're gonna get into the books that I don't have any videos on necessarily, and there's no reason for me not to be able to talk about them. So the first of those books, the first in that category, is Cover Story by Susan Rigetti. This is a book that I brought up in my mid-year freakout tag. It was a new release that I wanted to get to before the end of the year, and I was able to do that. Here we're following our main character. I believe her name is Laura. She was out here as, I believe she was an NYU student who gets an internship at Elle magazine during the summer, and so she gets quickly drawn into the orbit of one of the editors, and the editor, I think her name was like Kat Wolf, I want to say. It's something, editorial. And it quickly becomes apparent that the editor that Laura finds herself drawn to is a scammer. It's giving, Inventing Anna over on Netflix. It's giving Fire Festival, Billy McFarland. Like, she is not who she says she is. It's, Elizabeth Theranos. It's very in the zeitgeist in that way. And I had a really good time. It's told in a series of journal entries of Laura's, like her diary. We get email exchanges. We get text conversations between the FBI agents that are investigating this editor and the web that our character finds herself in. It was giving, you're in danger, you need to get out of here, girl. It was giving, this person is too stupid to live. It was giving it was giving everything that I needed it to give. Like, if you read the summary on Goodreads, if you read the synopsis and you're like, yeah, I would like to read that, I think you're going to have a good time with this book. If you read the synopsis and you're like, yeah, this doesn't interest me at all, I don't think the book is going to do anything that's going to win you over in order to get you on board. I also think that this book did a really good job of having a nice twist at the end that was really believable and was definitely foreshadowed. I really love when an author trusts themselves to foreshadow what they are going to do. In the past like 6 years, media has been like all about subverting expectations because like somehow foreshadowing is bad actually. And so when we're getting back to like, yeah, we're gonna foreshadow, I really appreciated it. So I gave that book 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Vladimir, which probably is more of a fall book. It's like definitely a book that you can get from like the hotter months to go into like the cold, cozy fall vibes. I still don't like this book. I didn't rate it on Goodreads. I think in my spreadsheet, it probably gave like 1.5 stars. Vladimir by Julia May Jonas is, I think it's attempting to be literary fiction. Julia May Jonas is a playwright, according to the author website. And once I found that out, the book kind of made more sense. Here we're following a woman who was like in her 50s maybe, and her husband, both her and her husband are English professors at this little liberal arts college, and her husband is on sabbatical because a number of his former students have accused him of like sexual assault. And we are following this woman as she just kind of makes fun of these women and is like, don't these women know that we all do this? Like, we all have sex with our professors and we all are understanding like what it is. And if my husband's a rapist, then I'm probably a rapist because I've had, situations with my former students, and I did that when I was a student. And as she's having all of these thoughts, she is also becoming infatuated with this new professor, Vladimir, whose wife like had this really big splashy book, and she attempted to commit suicide, and now he's writing a book, and it's just like obsession and like this weird commentary that I didn't really feel was adding anything that needed to like be added to a conversation. Like, it just didn't work. So if the cover of this book was not, this man with his like shirt open with the nice little like, titties out and the hairy chest, probably would never have picked it up. I was also a Libro FM influencer copy, so like I didn't have to spend any money on it. So like it has that going for it. and it's not very long. I want to say the audiobook was like 8 hours, so I was able to get through it pretty quickly. I read this when I was doing my experiment on trying to read for 100 pages a day. So like I was able to get through it, and I'm not upset that I finished it, but I don't think that it really added anything to my life in general. The next book I want to talk to you guys about is The Swimmers by Julie Otsuka. Yes, this is another literary fiction novel situation where the first half of the book is about this group of people that all go to the same gym, and they are bonded over their love of swimming, and they use the pool, and we get to learn about their rituals in the pool and how there are different people who use the pool for different reasons, and like just like their community that they have in the pool. Even though they don't really talk to one another, it's just like a shared space, and they have like customs, and it was really cozy in that way. It was like not the kind of book that I would typically read or pick up or want to get to, but I had seen it kind of floating around on some other people's anticipated lists at the end of 2021, like as an upcoming release. And I was in the library one day, and it was on the shelf, and I said, you know what, let me just pick it up. It's like super short. It's another one that's under 200 pages. I said, I can do this. I can read it. Why not? And then the second half of the book, we're following one of the swimmers because the pool is forced to close because there are cracks in the foundation, and they can't fix it. They've been trying to fix it, and the cracks keep coming back, and so they just have to shut it down. And so the person in the group we're following has dementia or like early onset Alzheimer's. There's something that is like forcing her to leave her apartment or her home, and she is transferred into a like long-term care facility. And like the first half of the book was definitely stronger than the second half of the book. Overall, I didn't rate this one either, just because it was so unlike anything I'd ever read. I probably would read another Julie Otsuka book just because it was very approachable and easy to get to, and it was so unlike anything else, and I would recommend it. But it's definitely a book I think you have to experience for yourself, and I can't really do it a whole lot of justice. The next book, we finally have a book that I own so I can like hold something up, and that was Corrine by Rebecca Morrow, which apparently is a pseudonym for a different New York Times bestselling author. This was sent to me by the kind people over at St. Martin's Press, so thank you to them. This is a book that we are following our main character, Corrine, who grew up in a very strict, like, evangelical Christian church situation. I think her father, like, eventually, I think he dies. I don't think he leaves the family, but maybe he was having an affair and he left. But either way, eventually, Corrine and her family move into the basement of one of the people at their church. And so her, Corrine, and Enoch, the teenage boy in the house, eventually have this kind of relationship with one another. But eventually it drives a wedge between them, and the book is then set after them being teenagers. They're now adults, and they're back in the same place, and them kind of like rekindling their relationship. It wasn't everything I thought the book was going to be. Like, it was a good book, but I was very interested to know like who was using the pseudonym. I'm never gonna know. I'm not gonna try and play like Detective Inspector Gadget or whatever. But I did think that it was lacking just a little bit, and I would have liked more exploration of Corrine, because she very much like distances herself from the church, and Enoch is, obviously he's reprimanded, but it's not as big. Like, the church exiles her. Like, they want nothing to do with Corrine after this situation happens, but Enoch is able to absorb that and like get to continue on there. And I feel like there was some that was a big part of the adult storyline, was them coming to terms with like Enoch still being very much in the church, but Corrine was like not really wanting anything to do with them. And there was just a little bit more I needed from the narrative in order to really love it. But overall, I had a good time. If the synopsis sounds interesting to you, I say go for it. It might work out better for you than it did for me. It's just kind of we'll see if it works for you, I guess. Then I read Everybody Looking by Candace Elo. This is a novel told in verse, and after reading this, I don't think I really fuck with novels told in verse. I had a sinking suspicion this was the case already. It was already something that I really don't gravitate toward, but I had this arc forever. So I finally picked up the audio from my library so I can get back and give feedback on it on NetGalley. and it was fine. I think if you really liked The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, you'd probably like this. It's very similar in terms of our character was raised in a really religious household. Here it's not Catholicism. She's just a regular evangelical Christian, kind of like over here in Corrine. So this is probably didn't benefit from reading Corrine and Everybody Looking back to back. But Everybody Looking, we're following this girl as she leaves high school, goes into college, and she's kind of having this conversation with herself and with her father about how she doesn't feel prepared for this. But she's also like trying to make her father proud, but also, trying to do what's good for her as she's coming into herself. And wasn't bad. It was a good book. It was, entertaining and whatnot, and it was enlightening in some aspects. But overall, I feel like novels told in verse often just feel like there is something lacking because while the word choice in a novel told in verse is very deliberate, so each word can mean something, and I had listened to this on audio, so I finally got the cadence of the poetry the way it was supposed to be read. I still wanted something more, and I felt like in a full-blown novel, for me personally, it would have hit a little bit harder. But there was nothing against the book that I had. So while I didn't rate it because it was in verse, I did have a decent time. So if this was something that sounded interesting to you, and you like novels told in verse, and you haven't already read this one, I say give it a shot. The next book I listened to was The Night Swim by Megan Golden. I think I had just finished like you had made a full depth with your beauty, and I had finished Wall of Storms, and those were like back to back 1 stars, and I was looking for something to just push in the middle of these things, and I just happened to pick up The Night Swim by Megan Golden because no, this is what happened. I was hosting some reading sprints, and someone said they were reading The Night Shift, and I thought they were reading The Night Swim. And then I was like, oh, well, clearly I can't read. And so that was in my mind, and I was looking for a little palate cleanser, and it happened to be available from the library. So I picked up the audiobook for this, and I feel like everybody knows the premise of this, where we have the podcast element, we have our investigative reporter who is looking into this rape case. She's going to follow that live on our podcast, and this rape case is linked to the mysterious drowning death of a girl in this town, and we're following both of these tracks simultaneously. This really solidified that I don't really care for podcast elements in books just because they have to be snippets. It was cute, the little podcast element, but overall I enjoyed the mystery aspect more. If you don't want to read about, a rape trial, don't read this book. Rape looms heavy over the plot of this, but overall after I say all that, I'm going to say I had a good time, but I really enjoyed Megan Golden. I want to read more from them, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The last book that I read in the month of July that I can talk to you guys about is With Prejudice. This was sent to me by the good people over at Grand Central Publishing, so thank you to them. This is by Robin Piguero. This man is an Afro-Latinx author, so if you're looking for some, Afro-Latinx thriller authors, I think this was really good. With Prejudice is a courtroom legal thriller situation, because I talked to you guys, I think it was in a book haul. I think that's my lane in the thriller space. The Night Swim was kind of like that. It was tangential. We had, the character was following this trial and chronicling the trial. With Prejudice, it's told in 2 timelines. So we have one timeline we are in with the jury as they deliberate on a case, and in the other timeline we are seeing the prosecution mounting their case against the defendant who is being accused of raping and murdering a girl. So reading 2 thrillers about, graphic rape was not on my 22 bingo list, but here we were. And I did give this book I think I gave this book 4 stars as well. Yes, I did. This book was excellent from start to finish, top to bottom. It wasn't, perfect. It didn't get that like 5 stars. It didn't make me like immediately connected, but I was interested from the beginning. And just when I thought earlier in this video, I talked about how I like the breadcrumbs and I like when I can think that I can see the foreshadowing. Here, Robin Piguero did this thing where I was like, okay, I see it. I know what happened. And then I got to the moment in the book and there was a twist. And I said, you know what? I did not see that coming, but it makes sense. It makes sense. I will allow it. And it was a good time. It was a good time. Again, it is about we're at trial. So we are going to discuss a bunch of evidence about how this woman was abducted, about how she was assaulted. And so again, triggers for that, but I thought it was a good book. And the ending, I can't say that I've seen in my limited reading experience. I've not read a book where this happened and I was just like, I was gagged. I was gagged. So if you're looking for something, I say read this. If you take nothing else away, I definitely think you should read With Prejudice. I'm going to say this one just because it's probably the least hyped book that I've read this month, other than like maybe The Swimmers. But I feel like The Swimmers was on a bunch of people's like radar. And I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about With Prejudice, especially people I know who read like, although it's not really a thriller and it has like mystery aspects, but it really is just crime fiction, which is also my lane. Like crime fiction, courtroom situations, that's kind of where I want to be. So overall, there was a lot of like hits and misses. It was kind of a meh reading month, but I'm not mad about July. I feel like July, it did what it needed to do. We got through it. We saw the other side, and August has already been really kind to me. So even if, July in the moment felt like I was reading a bunch of horribleness, like back to back to back, there were some like standouts, like With Prejudice, like The Night Swim, like Cover Story. So there was, moments of levity. Even the Heart of the Sun Warrior, I had a good time in that moment. So like there was some highs to counterbalance all of those lows. If you made it to the end of the video, you can go ahead and tell me, your worst read of last month. You can drop a blue or yellow heart, and I'll see you guys again soon with another video. But until then, and until next time.